How are you? That's very quiet. I hope you're enjoying yourself and that you're having a magnificent VDS. It's huge. And obviously that comes with little challenges, but the overall event is beautiful and it's an honor to be here with
Thanks,
you
man.
this
Really
particular
like that.
afternoon. Let me see. A few things about myself. I'm not going to be talking very long about myself, but as an introduction. I've been spending close to 24 years on the urban innovation space. Served in public sector, private sector, NGOs, and now I'm trying to make sense of it all with regard to what does it mean to run an urban innovation agenda? What does it mean to run a digital urban innovation agenda? How does it work and what can typically fail? I always like to commence my keynotes with a very, very simple saying, and this seat is right blocking it. I'm going to change that here. I was born in the year 20 BG. I was born in the year 29 before Google. So if you know when Google was founded, you can do the math as to how old I actually am. But the point being, I've got two legs, and with one leg, I'm standing and have been standing for like half of my life in a distinctively analog world, and the other one has been spent also professionally in a very digital one. And I try to make sense of it all. And I'm very critical on some of the things that I see and that I have seen, especially if you see it happening more than once and the first time it didn't work in the first place. So bear with me. I'm going to share with you a number of points of views, some of it fairly critical. And I will start out with that smart city chapter. That term has been around for roughly 20 years at this point, and the term has got to be associated with some very, very nice outcomes, but also some death by pilot and worse. And I'm not going to start with the average picture that you come to think of when you think of smart cities. When I work with communities across the world, whether it's Muscat in Oman, or whether it's Phoenix, Arizona, or whether it's in Rotterdam in Europe, and you ask people, where do you want to live? Can you describe what the perfect community is, where you are happy, where your children are happy, where your grandchildren can be trusted to be comfortable and happy? Then typically they may come up with a picture like this, and it's interesting because this is true across cultures and religions. People will describe something like this. Very green, very pleasant, very safe. Or it may look something like this. This is Vancouver, you know, always known to be a city that people have regarded as very, very pleasant. You may take this slightly Scandinavian perspective on it, and they may describe it as something like this. But not in that 25-year urban innovation career. Just once have I heard a person say, "Bas, I would really love to live in this." Yet, these are the visuals that we typically use when we talk about smart cities. This is what we produce. This is how we communicate. And in fact, this is not that livable. It isn't. The language has been an issue. The language and the visuals and the communications and agendas have been very much tech-driven in those 20 years. Technology companies got deeply involved, and just like with a carpenter, if you ask, what is your solution to any given problem, they will probably come up, well, you know, this is what helps me. This is probably what solves all of the issue. And we have been having a little bit too much of that. Too many solutions looking for a problem. Too many cities starting pilots that died well before there was any reasonable conclusion that would point at success. Yes, there were successes, but this was also something that has happened a lot. We talked and have been talking in plenty of PowerPoints, workshops, European Commission assemblies, that we were all going to be so citizen-focused. And many cities today claim that we are. Sometimes, yes, but one very honest leader in this city, Valencia, actually stated, if you're very, very honest, then perhaps we've been treating our citizens like NPCs. If you're in a gaming world, you know that term, non-playable characters. We haven't engaged with them. We haven't involved them as much as we would like to. So the smart city narrative has become something way too much that was top-down, and with some output that was relevant and some of it that never worked. So government pushed a lot, whereas the current technological capabilities, especially the immersive ones, the highly intelligent ones, allows us really to have citizens in and act on what they need, pull the services that they need, rather than getting it pushed upon them. Was it to benefit citizens really when we articulated those plans, or did we benefit City Hall for the efficiencies it was generating? That's not bad, but it wasn't the promise. We produced a language that was lost on most people, and it was mostly, and that's interesting, if you think of most of the work in the smart city space of the past 20 years, it's been about efficiencies. And I recently overheard a person that I respect very much, very smart in this space, who said, these efficiencies, well, we've been pushing them to the point of it undermining genuine innovation and human creativity. Is that the way forward? Have we been all that bad? No. And this is actually, ladies and gentlemen, what happened in that smart city space was a very normal thing to happen. I'm going to go slightly academic with you, just for a very small moment. Whenever there's an industrial revolution, there is a technology. That the technology starts somewhere. This is what you start out with, say a typewriter. A new technology gets introduced, digital. Next, what we got was the dinosaur PC, and it wasn't that smart. It could store your text, you could print it. It was still very much this, just slightly better. It was an optimized world of text processing, essentially. To the point where we actually have really smart laptops that allowed us during COVID, for instance, to have 100% virtualization of work. And we are now moving to a further immersive world. And whereas a person in the 1950s working that typewriter would still recognize what this is and what it does, that same person using the typewriter would be totally lost understanding this. This is when a new world has emerged. This is when the paradigm shift has happened. That's where we are about to go. And this is also where our next phase will differentiate from smart cities. So where do we stand? We have learned so many lessons in the past 20 years. We stopped being like kids in the candy store of tech. And it started to involve so many more way interesting professionals. Philosophers, sociologists, men, women, across the world. It's a very different profession from what it was 20 years ago. Technologies have moved on, and we now have not only the opportunity, but also the responsibility to arrive at a smart, sustainable, and inclusive, immersive environment in which we increasingly express ourselves. The European Commission, among others, said we call it the Cityverse. And that is exciting because if you look at, from an urban perspective, what's been happening is that cities, for as long as they have existed, have expressed themselves in two dimensions. The built environment, the physical, you can touch it, and the social economic dimension. What has been added to this now is the digital one. And that now that it's beyond optimizing old worlds and some smart city efficiencies, is becoming very real, and it's happening very, very fast. The question is not whether it's going to happen, but how it's going to happen and who is in charge of the design of that next iteration of digitalization, which we can call the Cityverse. If you don't do anything, trust Mark Zuckerberg. He will deliver it for you. If we want something that we decide on, if we want something that we believe is inclusive and creates the environment in which our children will play, then we have to actually take that responsibility and go all of the way. If you think of Cityverse, the first type of application that typically comes to mind is Digital twinning. I'm taking this and I'm stealing this with pride from the city of Rotterdam, a city that I used to serve as CDO. And we have friends here in the room from Rotterdam, so I can actually honestly say, gentlemen, I've been stealing this with pride. You're welcome. But the idea here in Rotterdam has been create that virtual environment which matches the physical one, make sure that it interacts, and make sure that you create use cases that are relevant to multiple actors, not just government. This is what's been happening. We already had a session earlier in the morning about the open urban platform that Rotterdam has created, which is a major stepping stone in getting it right. Oh no, there we go again. So, with the introduction of Cityverse and Cityverse thinking, we had a fair share of yet beautiful visuals, just like the smart city space, that don't tell us much. This is not the language that we want. And another thing, when we talk about the Cityverse, well, let's take these two out first, shall we? In fact, that it's not about headsets. It is more about mindsets, and it's about applying technologies in ways that they are proven to be useful to society, useful to our cities, useful to our citizens, with citizens having a say or two in it. So then what? If we are going to define this, oh, I promised to be academic with you only once. Sorry, this is the second time that I'm going to go academic with you. You can read this, but I'll just put some emphasis on some terms. It's the next generation digital realm. Inclusive and citizen-centric. Not tech company-centric. Communication, interaction, creativity, participation, and decision-making for all. This is not just about some playing around. This is not exposing citizens to what's possible. This is actually about how do we engineer that future realm of human conduct. What does that look like? How can everyone be on board? How can everyone communicate in it? And how can everyone be encouraged to decide, to participate, but also decide in what it is, whatever is happening, whether it's a political activity or a creative activity, it doesn't matter. If I think of basic Cityverse applications, this is a company coming from the Netherlands. It's a scale-up at this point. And they can just manage to peer through mobility in any given city. What happens if you close down one artery and you don't want to have absolute chaos? Well, it used to take 6 months of research to find out. Right now, it's 6 minutes. AI-powered, highly visualized. It's one of those use cases. This comes again from Rotterdam. What Rotterdam created is a completely gamified 3D environment where you see the exact results, the actual impact of flooding. And these streets are real. They are a virtual rendering through which you can walk. You can now actually see what happens if that flooding takes place. Great tool, not just for insurance companies and banks and city management, but also for citizens. They can see what is going to happen to their street if this weather event will take place. And with climate change, trust us, trust the academia on this, that will happen. Crisis management. Predict pieces of what would happen if we're in serious trouble. More war on the European continent, complete outage of the internet for months. What would happen if that happens? Great if you have an environment in which you can do all of this. But so far, it's still highly professional type of use cases that we're talking about. Think of things that are way more citizen-centric. This is your neighborhood. You can walk right through it, and you don't need to even use headsets. There are plenty of ways of making this happen. It's about a gamified environment where you can see what will happen to your street, you can play around with it, you can bring in children, and can we potentially agree that whenever you had a session with citizens about your neighborhood and about a particular street that's up for urban regeneration, then you get citizens in to co-decide, and what do they get? They get a 2D PDF. And that 2D PDF is distinctively boring, is lost on a lot of people. It's using specific professional language that's lost on most. This allows people to actually get on board and see what's going to happen. And they can provide their opinion. This is a very participatory piece of technology that can change that conversation in the most rudimentary ways. Education. Again, from the city that I served at one point and that I've still advised, Rotterdam, one school, so demotivated, because of the way technologies were to be applied during COVID. How much more team calls or Zoom calls can you stomach for educational purposes? That they said, we're going to create a digital twin for our educational environment, and we're going to make it more fun, and we're going to make it much more gamified, and that is going to also help our students to actually use this technology for creative purposes. So the interesting thing is you can have a lot of these type of use cases where you gamify, and then this particular rule may actually apply if we get it right. If you can game, you can learn. If you can game, you can participate. If you can game, you can collaborate. And if you can game, you can co-decide. And I think that's a huge promise. The promise does not mean you're going to get it. This needs hard work for all of us in this room, to get this right. But that promise is out there. That perspective is out there. That opportunity is out there. Cities are also moving. Still Rotterdam. Roland van der Heijden, a great visionary working at the city of Rotterdam, has just been named the first Chief Cityverse Officer of the city of Rotterdam. And what's interesting about that, it's not just that this is new for Rotterdam, but in fact he is the first Chief Cityverse Officer in the entire world. This just happened 2 months ago. But it's important, here's a first. 120 years ago we had the electricity manager for a municipality or a factory. That job came and that job went. But when those jobs come, they tell you something about where a technology is moving. And so I think it's a very telling fact, and I congratulate Rotterdam leadership for having the audacity to take that leap and actually nominate one of their core leaders to say, this is what you're going to do. You're going to be the Chief Cityverse Officer to the city. You have our mandate, now make it work. So, last chapter. What do we need to do, ladies and gentlemen? And this could be a long discussion of hours, and obviously we don't have the time. But what does it take in order to ensure that we create the cityverse that most of us want and that we need? It starts out with language. As I already said, with the smart city space, we produce so much language that was lost on many, many people. I was part of a UN meeting at one point in Bilbao, and I met the leader of the authority of the Basque region in northern Spain. And this leader said, look guys, with all of your stories, all of the United Nations language, all of the tech language, if I go into a bar in the Basque region, I'm going to talk to them about these technologies and about United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I'm at severe risk of getting thrown out of that bar. You know, so we have the responsibility to ensure we're not producing this type of language, but that we actually produce language that is understood, that's common across stakeholders, so that we understand what it is that we're doing. Educate your teams, educate yourself, educate your organizations, and do it by means of education that is now frontier line. We need more collaboration. Government cannot do this alone, private sector cannot do this alone, citizens are needed. This term quadruple helix is something that we put in every proposal that we forward to the European Commission. I know that term has been used a lot, but we need it in this space. We need it more than ever. We need public-private partnerships that work, and so on. We need to have a serious discussion among ourselves as to where we store the data. Is this going to be, like in some countries, more on the company side, and will we trust the Apples and the Googles to do the right job? Or are we going to have a very authoritative way of looking at this and say, this is how your data gets managed? Or do we here in the European Union have an alternative to this? A slightly more transparent way of managing data, where we perhaps should even consider the creation of data utilities, just like electricity and sewage systems. These are now critical infrastructures, data as critical assets, and we need to manage them well. It's a question, and we should debate it more. We will need digital development goals. If the United Nations has sustainable development goals, then right now, with this transition that we're having, we should be creating digital development goals. And I know for a fact that this is about to be announced, that this will in fact be created for cities. And last point, but not least, bring the young people on board. Don't have just the 50-plus-year-olds sitting in boardrooms deciding on this. They do not always understand the language. They do not have the dynamics. They have generally never gamed or only played on Atari like in the 1980s. And it's very important that we get those young people on board because it's their future. It's their future, and it's our responsibility that they're on board. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bas. And thank you for your rushing. I know we were like with timing. Thanks for your time, and have a good rest of the fair.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.